Hello everyone, welcome back to YK Reviews. Welcome back to the Nightmare on Elm Street retrospective reviews. We took a break for a couple of days here, but now we're getting into full swings of things. So let's get straight into it here. So as I mentioned, we took a break. I've done part 1 and part 2, so you can check those out on the channel. We'll be doing the retrospective reviews for all the Nightmare on Elm Streets leading up to the final one. And we're going to be doing a tier ranking video, so that's going to be coming out on October 31st on Halloween night. So definitely subscribe to the channel so that you're not missing out on that. And if you do like these types of content, also consider hitting that subscribe button, hitting the like button, showing some love to the channel. Highly appreciate it here. But when it comes to Nightmare on Elm Street 3, I'll be completely honest with you. This is one of the better Nightmare on Elm Street. You get the introduction of the Dream Warriors. There's some great one-lines in there, some great dream sequences in there. So honestly, a really actually enjoyable movie. So we start off with the opening sequence. You get introduced to this character, Kristen, and she's in her room. She's doing this modeling of like the house, which we come to find out was actually Freddy Krueger's house very early on. So she ends up trying to go to bed when her mother's coming in, as her mother's got some guest, which I'll just be completely blunt. She's trying to get in bed with the guy that she has downstairs and stuff. So she's getting annoyed with Kristen, needing her to go to bed. When Kristen eventually does fall asleep, we get this dream sequence. She goes into Freddy's house, the house that she built with all these scraps and glue and that paper mache and all that kind of stuff. She ends up in the actual house itself. You've got the classic Freddy Krueger song, the 1-2 Freddy's Coming For You song. As I mentioned in the very first retrospective review, one of my wife's favorite songs that I love playing for her. So that song is being played while she's in the house exploring. She finds this little girl in this little tricycle. You get that Shining vibe to it. Now I can't remember if this one came out after The Shining or before The Shining, but you get that little kid on a tricycle there, that classic horror trope that you get there. She ends up trying to save this little girl. She's running away from Freddy, goes into this room with like dead bodies hanging in there, only to eventually wake up. And you get honestly one of the most amazing practical effects. You get her in the bathroom as Freddy's appearing in this mirror. You get the sink knobs turning into like hands, and I really like the effects that was going into this, the practicality of it. Freddy uses his claws or his knives to end up scratching one of her arm, but it made it look like she cut herself where her mother walks in with her holding the blade. So it ends up looking like she cut herself, and honestly a really great opening sequence to this movie. So then we move into where most of this movie is going to be taking place, this psychiatric hospital where you've got these people having these nightmare scenarios, but nobody's believing them, thinking that they're crazy. So you get the hospital setting. So as she's being admitted into the hospital, Kristen that is, we get an amazing sequence as well where the doctors are trying to inject her, but she's doing some great mannerisms, maneuvers, ends up getting one of those razors. She cuts the doctor, who is being played by Lawrence Fishburne, like one of his very early movies. So it was so awesome to see him in this. So she ends up cutting him. She ends up singing the Freddy song, and that's when we get reintroduced to the character from the very first movie, Nancy Thompson, played by Heather Langenkamp. And really great seeing her. We also get introduced to the characters of the movie. So you've got the doctor, like the main doctor. You've got other characters in there, like such as Joey, Kincaid, which standout character in this whole franchise, in this whole movie. Kincaid's one-liners are absolutely epic. You get introduced to him, you get introduced to Philip, who is a sleepwalker. So you get introduced to various different characters that we're going to be following, the Dream Warriors essentially. And so then we move into another dream sequence by Kristen. She's in the same house. She's seeing this moldy pig in the dining table. She's going around the house. She enters this room where everything is just like collapsing. Wooden pallets are just flying left, right and center. And then you get honestly one of the most freaky looking Freddy Kruegers in the whole franchise. You got this lizard looking dinosaur head shape thing, something that you'll see from Harry Potter, coming out and trying to eat Kristen. Nancy's falling asleep in the other room in real life, when she ends up suddenly into the same dream sequence. She ends up stabbing Freddy in the eye, waking them both up. And with this, what I really like about this movie, I mentioned it in the first one, is this balance of the dream sequence and then the real life situation, that balance in there. With this one, you do get a lot of like the dream sequences and how they're battling Freddy. And with Freddy, like you get this amazing performance by Robert Englund, which honestly is no surprise. But you have more dream sequences than real life situations when it comes to like the Dream Warriors. There's other aspects in the movie, other subplots I will talk about, but it was just a really nice blend. And with the dream sequences, honestly one of the strongest dream sequences in the whole franchise, in my personal opinion. But as they wake up, we're now into this group's therapy session here. So you've got the doctor, you've got the nurse who's such a cynic and honestly just a bitch in this movie. You've got the characters like I mentioned, you've got Joey, you've got Kincaid, you've got these other characters, and Kincaid again throwing some great one-liners in there. Like his lines were just absolutely incredible, and I wish we got to see more of him in the rest of the franchise, but I won't go into spoilers when it comes to that just yet. But he has a fantastic performance. Now, as they're talking about the group therapy session, they're telling everybody about the dream sequences, but obviously the nurse and the doctor aren't one to believe them. So then Philip ends up being the brunt of this as he's sleeping his dream sequence. You've got Freddy Krueger, who turns one of the clay monster creatures that Philip has been working on, turns into Freddy himself. He ends up slicing both the arms, both the legs, peeling out. I don't even know what you call them. Like, I don't know that part of the body, but he ends up peeling all of that off from Philip, making him look like a puppet and just like having him walk around. He ends up taking him right to like the top of the, not in terms of the roof, but in terms of like the very high level of the building, as the other characters are screaming for him to stop, not do it. He ends up it looks like he's sleepwalking, but it's Freddy controlling him with strings. He ends up just jumping, falling out of the building and just landing slap bang in the middle of the concrete, and so Philip ends up dying. So as I was mentioning, like a brilliant sequence of events, dream sequence, but it's just very gruesome and really brilliantly done in the movie. So obviously after this happens, they have another group session. The good doctors are just shitting on these kids, on these dream warriors, I guess you could call them right now. Like the nurse just shitting on them. Kincaid once again throwing these dialogue, throwing these one-liners. It's just like a back and forth with them. Like nobody wants to believe them. They're trying to throw out everything there, but it's just, it makes for an amazing sequence. Like you've got these serious dream sequence going on, but then you have like this take a seat back kind of moment with these characters and with these funny lines and funny scenes. And so the next victim of Freddy is Jennifer, who says that she's going to become the next movie star. She ends up falling asleep, and then you get this dream sequence of like Freddy popping his head out of the TV, his arms from the to both sides of the TV, ends up grabbing her head and just shoving her head into the TV, killing her. But before he does that, he throws some amazing dialogue in there. Like, I don't know who wrote this script. I honestly can't remember from the top of my head. I don't know if it was part of the script or if like these characters were able to just like improvise some of the lines, but the line deliveries were absolutely amazing in this movie, with Freddy talking about showbiz before shoving her head into the TV. Just absolutely made for this movie. So we get some more explanation of what's going on when it comes to the movie, when it comes to the plot with Nancy. She's getting these kids around in this group therapy session. She explains to the audience, to us basically, that the reason why Freddy's going after these kids is because they are the remaining kids of the Elm Street crew, I guess you could call it. So he's trying to take care of everybody from Elm Street. So then Nancy has this idea of using Kristen. She's got this power apparently to bring everybody into the dream world working together. So they decide to do all of that to try and get into the dream world to take on Freddy. And that's where we get the classic Freddy's tongue. So Joey gets tricked by Freddy. So Freddy is disguising himself as this nurse who apparently Joey has been into this whole time. He ends up kissing her, but then obviously you get Freddy's tongue. Freddy uses his tongue to tie both of Joey's arms into the bed. He ends up opening the bed to like this gates of hell looking thing. And so the rest of the crew are going into this dream world to try and rescue Joey. And there was a funny moment too, like the nurse just comes in and all you see is everybody's just like dozed off asleep, having no idea what's going on in the dream world. But because of this, Joey has ended up in a coma in real life while he's in this dream sequence, while he's hanging. I would say he's hanging on by a thread, but he's actually hanging on by a tongue with the hell right beneath him. And so before we go into the whole third act of the movie, like I mentioned, there is this subplot going on here. So you've got the doctor, the main doctor that we've been following. Him and Nancy were trying to work out everything to see what's going on. They end up leading towards Nancy's dad, the same character from the first movie. So it was great to see him coming back as they're looking to see what's going on, to try and figure out, because there's this nun that's been following them around. And so we come to find out that this nun is actually Freddy's mother. And we see the backstory of Freddy Krueger, which apparently his mother was trapped inside the hospital with 100 patients. I'm not going to go into too much details of what happened, but you can kind of assume, and if you've seen the movie you know what happened. But 100 men, 1 woman, and so that's how Freddy was conceived, and that's what took place, and that's why he's the way he is. They get into like more of that detail in later movies, but for me, I'll be honest, when it comes to that subplot, I'm kind of like hit and miss when it comes to it. I would prefer that they just kept it as more as a mystery when it comes to like Freddy, not really see what's going on when it comes to like his parents or anything like that. But it is what it is, and they find out they need to actually throw some holy water, do some voodoo stuff on the actual corpse of Freddy Krueger, so they have to go and look for it to try and do that, to try and stop Freddy Krueger. But that's kind of like the subplot going on there. But because of everything that took place, Kirsten gets sedated. She's in the quiet room that they're calling it, which is kind of like the naughty room, naughty step thing when these patients get out of line. So she ends up falling asleep. The other characters, Nancy and the rest of the kids, go into this room, get this group therapy session going on there, and so they end up falling asleep so that they can try and get in with Kirsten to try and rescue Joey. So then Freddy goes after them, and you get some amazing sequences and some amazing lines in there. So he goes after Kirsten first. We go back to like the opening scene of the movie when you've got Kirsten in bed, you've got Freddy coming with Kirsten's mother's head there. She does some amazing parkour shit, doing flips over the wall and stuff like that. Like, it's just shit that you won't expect to see. She manages to escape. Freddy goes after Taryn, I believe her name was. I might be butchering it, but he's in this alleyway with her. She tries to fight him off, but with this knife fight that they're doing, Freddy's able to easily overcome it. He turns his fingers into like injections and ends up stabbing her, so ends up killing her in the process. And then you get the next character who I honestly can't remember his name. He was the one that's in the wheelchair in real life, but Freddy ends up getting this demonic wheelchair to go after him, again throwing some great disses to this kid. But he apparently is like a wizard master in the dream world. He ends up blowing up the chair, but Freddy still is able to overpower him and still able to kill him in the process. So you've got Taryn and this kid also dying here in the dream world. And so you've got Nancy and you've got Kristen meeting up together in this dream world. They end up meeting with Kincaid, who starts calling out Freddy with this character. Just you can't get enough of him. The lines that he throws out there was just incredible, calling out Freddy Krueger. So they find this door that leads them to the basement where Joey is like hanging over hell. They try to beat up Freddy by like doing some punches and kicks, but just having no effect on Freddy whatsoever. However, like I said, while all this is going on during the third act, you've got that subplot with the doctor and Nancy's dad. They end up finding the body. They end up trying to throw holy water in it. Freddy appears in them in real life. He ends up killing Nancy's dad, ends up beating the doctor, throwing him in the grave, trying to get rid of them. Ends up going back into the dream sequence there where they freed up Joey. They try to escape, but Freddy ends up putting them in this like mirror dimension where Joey, who hasn't been able to speak throughout the whole movie, ends up finding his voice, blowing up all the mirrors. You get this one scene which for me I wasn't a huge fan of, but you get Freddy ends up tricking Nancy by pretending to be her dad and killing Nancy in the process. So Nancy is officially dead, her dad is officially dead, so the characters from the first movie are now completely dead, which, now I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of this choice, killing of Nancy Thompson, but the way she goes out honestly really was great, because she gets stabbed by Freddy, but then she ends up, as Freddy's going towards killing Kristen, Nancy ends up grabbing Freddy's own finger claws and stabbing Freddy in his chest, while on the other side of things here, you've got that doctor. He manages to like regain consciousness. He throws the holy water on the corpse, does some exorcism type shit, ends up killing Freddy in the process, and that is supposedly taking care of Freddy. And so they end up escaping the dream world, and that's when you get the final sequence, the last scene of the movie, when you've got Nancy Thompson's funeral going on there. That same doctor goes and sees that nun appearing, and then when he goes to follow her, that's where we get the reveal that the nun was actually Freddy Krueger's mother, as we see the tombstone in there, closing out the movie, ending part 3. Now, one of my favorite movies in this whole franchise, just because of the dream sequences, the kills, the one lines, but the whole subplot I could do without. Again, it's hit and miss. The decision to kill off Nancy, while I kind of understand the decision for it and the reason for it, since it is a third movie into the franchise, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but did enjoy the way that she did go out. All in all, a really fun movie and a really enjoyable one. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you've seen the movie, what your thoughts are about it, where you would rank this in the franchise so far. Let me know in the comment section down below. But that about wraps it up for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I thank you so much for listening. This is 1K Reviews. Keep an eye out for the rest of the franchises we're going to be coming along this week. But